Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So, I don't normally talk about a lot of issues like this one, but I felt the need to talk about this because I don't think people really talking about the real issue of child abuse. The issue of child abuse is really serious, and child abuse of any kind is not easy to talk about. So, every year, more than 3 million reports of child abuse are made in the US. So it's terrible. It's an epidemic that at Child Help, this program, there's many programs out there. This one in particular, I pulled it up because it gives descriptions of the different forms of child abuse. So I wanted to talk about it for, a little bit because child helps are dedicated to put an end to this epidemic. But there are other programs that are out there. This is not the only one. I really pulled this up because it had some excellent descriptions that were not very long, that pretty much give a definition of different forms, a few different forms of child abuse. So, what is child abuse? Child abuse is when a parent or a caregiver, whether through action or failing to act, causes injury, death, emotional harm, or risk of serious harm to a child. There are many forms of child maltreatment, including neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, exploitation, and emotional abuse. So these sections below pretty much talk about, in descriptive form, in brief, some definitions of the abuse. So, physical abuse, which some people are familiar with, is when a child or is when a child is when the parent or caregiver causes any non-accidental physical injury to a child. Okay, so that means it's not by accident. They've been slapped around, they've been beaten, they've been physically harmed. So there are many signs of physical abuse. And if you see any of the following signs, you have to get help right away. So 28.3% of adults report being physically abused as a child. But I believe that number should be higher because sometimes people are so callous to the physical abuse. They grow up in a household seeing a lot of violence and exposed to a lot of violence and experiencing violence. They don't even know that they're being abused because they look at it as being normal. So, sexual abuse, which a lot of us have been talking about lately, is when it occurs when an adult uses a child for sexual purposes or involves a child in sexual acts. So it also includes when a child who is older or more powerful uses another child for sexual gratification or excitement. So 20.7% of adults report being sexually abused as a child. Emotional abuse is when a parent or caregiver harms a child mentally or socially, social development, or causes severe emotional harm. It is considered emotional abuse when a single incident may be abuse. Most often, emotional abuse is a pattern of behavior that causes damage over time. And so 10.6% of adults report being emotionally abused. If your caregiver, your parents calls you names, calls you stupid, dumb, and maybe worse than that, or says you're good for nothing, or you're just like your other parent, or your whatever, blank blankety blank, and they cuss you out. Um, Child neglect. Um, it's even hard for me to say some of these things. Child neglect is when a parent or a caregiver does not give the care, supervision, affection, or support needed for a child's health, safety, and well being. So, child neglect includes physical neglect, inadequate supervision, emotional neglect, medical neglect, and educational neglect as well. Like not taking the kids to school, not taking them to the doctor, not, you know, seeing about, any bruises after they physically abuse the child, of course, because they're afraid they're going to get, which they should be, locked up because they've hit on the kids. Um, Emotional neglect. So, anyway, it has down here a 1-800 for a child, 1-800 422 4453 for help. And those are confidential calls that you can make to child help. Now, there's also resources and stuff, but the reason why I use this is because it gave like pretty brief descriptions. There's probably more descriptions that you could find, I'm sure, but I'll say this, because a lot of things have been coming out about the stories that have happened even through R. Kelly's childhood, how he was abused, about how they're bringing up these issues with Michael Jackson, and I don't want to pick sides right now on this video. Um, I would say that child abuse in and of itself is not only a moral wrong, it's not only disgusting. There's a lot wrong with it, and there are a lot of people that have been victimized. Um, it's also been used in religion, and there have been recent allegations in the Catholic Church, and outside of the Catholic Church, there's been other churches that also have been allegations where there have been clergy people or people who you think you can trust, that have been in the church that have committed acts of sexual abuse. And that is true. And so that has been all over the internet recently. The Pope has spoken out on some issues having to do with that. Um, I'm not even going to pull up anything right now on those issues. It's not easy to talk about child abuse. What bothers me is when you have real victims and they've gone through something really traumatic in their life, and you may have people that may or may not be really telling the truth. And to use this as an opportunity to take liberty, to use a platform for something so horrible that many people have experienced in their lifetime and suffered. It's not easy to talk about. It's not at all a laughing matter. There shouldn't be memes and jokes about it. It's serious. And what I feel is horrible is for someone who can't speak for themselves or defend themselves, for something like this to constantly be coming back, I feel it's wrong. I feel like right away, if something really does happen, you need to really hold to that story. Don't waver, don't change your story, don't turn around and recant the story for money. When a person is gone and they can't be defensive about their stance on where they stand in a situation, and it's all for money, then I feel some type of way about it. I feel like somebody's not being honest. I feel like the stories have a lot of flies in the net. The other thing is that if somebody experiences trauma in their childhood and they've been accustomed to that, they've grown callous to violence, they've grown callous to even the sexual abuse, and they grow up thinking this is normal, then they might do this act on someone else and repeat this act, and they find it to be normal for them to do this. They don't think they did anything wrong, even though we all see it on the tape as being wrong. So if you get what I'm saying, you know, there's a multiple stories going on right now, and I'm not going to even name the names of people. And I believe people know some of these individuals that I might be kind of using these scenarios on. But I feel like any form of child abuse is not taken lightly. It should be taken extremely serious. And so if you're using this as a tool or a weapon to profit off of it in any form, shame on you, because there are real victims out there. It's the same thing that happened when somebody lies and says they've been beaten up because they're gay. They're real victims. There are real hate crimes going on and real victims of hate crimes. Shame on you to use that opportunity to do something like that. I still, though, will say this: to lie, you shouldn't get 60 or 70 years in prison for a lie. Okay, that's my opinion. I still say this: you shouldn't try to bring or resurface old wounds of something that you know that was proven that this individual was not guilty for something. In no shape, form, or fashion, if I see any video having to do with pedophilia, am I looking at it as to be some sling, fly by night film that's just a money venture only. It's going to dig deep because they want to incriminate somebody so they can make it believable so that this person can suffer even in the afterlife, because they're looking at it not only as the money venture, but they want to make people's minds think that, hey, maybe we should look into the life of this individual a little bit deeper. We don't really know this person. We're not friends with this person. We didn't really have a close relationship with this individual. We're going on hearsay. We really don't know if this happened because there's no proof of it. But we have incidences where we've seen proof of it, but we want to act like it didn't happen. So what's wrong with those pictures? Is it that a lot of people have experienced some form of child abuse and they're used to this? They've been indoctrinated in it. They've grown up in a household where they've been physically or sexually abused, and to them, it doesn't seem like it's bad. It may be normal to them. There's so many things that we could come up, so many opinions that we could come out with, so many things that we could, go back and forth on. The only concrete evidence we have is videotape and the individual's words. But if we're only hearing one side of a story and we're not able to hear both sides of the story, we don't really have very much to go on, do we? So I just want to leave it with that. But what I'm saying is that in no shape, form, or fashion am I for people that are abusive to children in any way. I am totally against that. And I feel sorry for the people who have had to go through those type of incidences. And I'm not going to share my life about what I've experienced in my personal life, but I can say this, that I'm no stranger to these subjects. And I'll leave it at that. Now, I did see an article where Corey Feldman, he mentioned that he felt some type of way about the film that is being put out. And he should, because in no way is child abuse easy to talk about if you've been victimized by it. And all of the things that are being thrown out there here in Hyther is really disturbing. You know, I like the fact that people have talent. You know, I've listened to music, I've listened to people's talents, and I acknowledge that they do have talent. Yet, I also understand the ramifications when people do something that is extremely wrong. The other thing is that I also understand, on top of all of this, is that if a person is not able to defend themselves, that is wrong. To talk about a person and to pretty much defame a person when they're not here to defend themselves. And I stand behind that as well. Um, I don't find pedophilia entertaining whatsoever. I wouldn't think that somebody that would make a video or a documentary about any of that would be entertainment. But I have been hearing some stories that are very shocking. And I feel like people are not taking it really serious. I would say that for somebody to make a documentary and it turns up that these are just allegations and hearsay and it isn't true. If anybody deserves to have time behind bars, would be them. That's my true feelings, because you went so far as to actually create a film about something and put someone in it who is not here to defend themselves and list them as a pedophile, even though they were acquitted and there was no proof. And so to do something like that is wrong. And for people to get online and make a joke about it and laugh about it or debate about it lightly and throw it out there and point fingers at one another and then say, well, what about the parents? The parents, too. Why would you take money? What parent? I'm thinking as a parent, in no way in my mind would I ever left any of my sons to stay with some guy who I don't even know, even if they are famous, I don't really know them, to stay with them for long periods of time, for hours, unless it was their father. And I'd still even feel some type of way about that. I want to know where they're going, what time they're leaving, and when they're getting back, and who else is going to be there. And if it's somebody I'm not sure about, I want to go too. And I want to be included. And I want to see what's going on. But shouldn't we also have a conversation with what type of parents were involved also? But the point here is that child abuse of any form should not be taken lightly. It is not a laughing matter whatsoever at all. And if somebody is committing acts of any of this, usually it's because it has happened to them. And whoever those people are, they never been held accountable for it. So it's a vicious cycle that continues on. And recently there was an incident that was in the paper about child abuse. Okay. And I was reading about it, and I was like, wow, that is so sad that that happened, because immediately when someone saw that something happened in this situation, they reported it. When they saw that it was a problem, they saw the signs and they reported it. And so there's so many things that are in the news lately. And it's sad because I think people don't take certain topics really serious. They kind of look at it as a joke. And so child abuse is not a joke at all. So, okay. Now, this was a story that happened, and this was recent. There were parents that were charged with child abuse after our Olive Garden waitress posted a photo on Facebook. So that photo, I guess, some things had been removed from Facebook. But this waitress, she saw the signs of child abuse and reported it right away. So two Tennessee parents were charged with child abuse and aggravated assault after an observant Olive Garden waitress posted about the distressing behavior on Facebook. So Mark Lee Pierce, 33, and Jessica Woodwork, 36, were arrested after a waitress by the name of Jordan Cooper, 21, took to social media to ask for the public's help in identifying this couple, who she saw dining with their two children at the franchise Paducah, Kentucky. So if I pronounced it wrong, maybe those of you who are living out there, are you familiar with it, can pronounce it. But the location was on Sunday night. So tonight, working at the Paddock Olive Garden, I had a couple that came in with a child, and the child was severely beaten in the face. Cooper, who is an 8-month pregnant, who wrote in a now deleted Facebook post obtained by WDSP. Okay, so she described how the child looked. So I guess it was really disturbing. So she saw the signs of physical abuse. So the child's face was black and blue all over. The guy in the picture was force feeding the little girl food down her throat and grabbing her by her shirt and getting her in the face. So Cooper went on to describe how the man, later identified as Pierce, would continually take one of the young girls, who was just 20 months old, to the bathroom when she would cry. So I couldn't serve because my heart hurt so bad, Cooper wrote. In hopes of helping the child, Cooper enlisted the help of her coworker and another table to secretly take photos of these parents. So, however, Cooper watched the man take an additional trip to the men's room with a child and no diaper bag. She followed, okay? And so this is really sad, y'all, but this happened. And so Cooper, who happens to be a 911 operator, took notice. So I got everything so I could run him and find who he was, Caldwell told WDSP. I found that and ended up contacting a Paris Police Department in Tennessee. So local authorities arrested Pierce and Woodwork during a welfare check on their home that night. Responding officers reported observing significant signs of abuse, including facial bruising on the child in question. So I heard the conditions of the home were horrific. A police officer had to collect himself outside. So this couple, their house was really probably very disturbing to see. So there was a clear sign of neglect and child abuse. So it goes on to say that Pierce and Woodwork are both held on a $200,000 bond as the investigation continues. So this article was initially published on AOL.com. So that is an example of child abuse. And so this is probably an unrelated video, but they did have a video on the whole thing earlier. So I just wanted to say that. But anyway, I'm going to let this video go. I just feel like there's more things that are going to come out, I'm sure. I'm not condoning any child abuse of any form or fashion. I don't think it is right. I don't see it as right. Anybody who has committed any acts of child abuse definitely needs to seek help, but most people won't. And the cycle, the ugly cycle, vicious cycle keeps going on and on. So to use these topics also just for self gratification is extremely wrong. Well, anyway, I'm going to leave this. With that being said, like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for listening.